Okay, so it looks like we got some breaking news here. This is relating to the vice presidential sweepstakes. Once again, seems to be the biggest story currently. Who is going to be Kamala Harris's vice president? Kamala's vice president is the big deal here. So of course, unions are going to be huge in this election, especially any like union voters in the swing states of especially the Rust Belt, the RBs. And so the United Auto Workers president, I'm sure you guys know who he is, Shawn Fain. He's the president. He's pretty well known now. It says UAW president voices concerns about Kelly Shapiro amid Harris's running mate search. So it says United Auto Workers president Shawn Fain said in a Thursday interview that he sees some, quote, troubling stances on labor matters held by at least two of the Democrats who are being considered as potential running mates for Vice President Kamala Harris. Fain, an influential figure in Democratic politics, noted that Arizona U.S. Senator Kelly didn't come out as an early supporter of the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, PRO Act, which aimed to provide safeguards for collective bargaining in workplaces, and that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has backed private school vouchers. However, ultimately, Fain said his union, which endorsed Harris for president on Wednesday, will support the Democratic ticket regardless of whom Harris selects. Quote, at the end of the day, we have to defeat Donald Trump, Fain said of the Republican nominee. Another Donald Trump presidency would be a complete disaster for this country and for working class people in this country. It would, of course, be a complete horrible disaster. Offshoring of jobs was crazy under the Trump administration. He gave a lot of tax cuts to the wealthy, of course. And so basically, what you can see here is that he is saying that there's concerns from there about these people. And so here's a comment from Mark Kelly. He says, I would have voted for it on day one. Kelly told the Huffington Post I would vote for it today. I am, like a lot of legislation, working to make it better. But if it came to the floor today or any day going back to the day I was sworn in, I would vote for it. As for Shapiro, Fain said that the Pennsylvania governor has supported taxpayer-funded private school vouchers. That's a, quote, big issue because public education has been under attack by the Republican Party, Fain contended. Public sector labor unions representing teachers have long opposed taxpayer-funded vouchers for students who attend private schools. We all know what the voucher system is, Fain said. It's a system where the rich people can have the taxpayers fund their kids' private education. The media outlet Spotlight Pennsylvania reported last week that Shapiro had become the most prominent Democratic voice in Pennsylvania for taxpayer-funded private school vouchers. I think it's really important that we fully fund public education, Shapiro said, and I also think it's really important that we empower parents to put their kids in the best place for them to succeed. So it appears that these are the big concerns, and then for other people, this is like specific union concerns. I guess there's also public union concerns about this because this impacts teachers' unions, like public teachers' unions from the private school vouchers. I think Shapiro ended up, vetoing the bill when it came to his desk. I'm not 100% sure. I believe it is. But those are kind of the union concerns that he has about both Shapiro and Kelly. Kelly, I think, is pretty much dead on arrival, first off, because of that, but second off, because I think he just doesn't really bring anything for you to the ticket. He doesn't bring any sort of... he's actually losing in the only poll that I've seen with him in Arizona versus Trump. He's actually losing the race. And so what I want you guys to see is let's check out and see who it is that Shawn Fain says that the union supports. Check it out.
Look, two names really resonate high with our union. The top name, it was Andy Beshear. I'm a huge Andy Beshear fan. I believe Andy Beshear, he's been there with us every step of the way. And then also Governor Walz in Minnesota. Those are really our top two people. And both of those men walked the picket line with our workers this past fall. And they've always been there for working class people. So, we'll see what the vice president does. And, like I said, she's got to pick who she's comfortable with. But that's where we're leaning. So.
Yeah.
So it looks like the union is saying that there's a lot of concern about Shapiro and Kelly, and that their top person is actually Beshear, even over Walz. So it looks like Walz and Beshear are the top ones, but Beshear, I guess, is the top one. And so I think at the beginning, progressives were really heavily behind Beshear, but then it seems like it turned to Walz because Walz was having really, really good public appearances. It appears that what's most likely going to happen is Shapiro is going to end up being the candidate. And I think that it's pretty interesting because if we look at these polls here, you can see here that Shapiro is actually winning by 10 in this Fox News poll here, right here. You can see he's leading by 10. In the same Fox News poll, Harris is down, Harris is +2 in a poll with all of the candidates. And then in an objective comparison head-to-head, she's tied. So she's tied with him in the Fox News poll, and then he's winning by 10 points. And then this public policy polling, which I think is kind of more like progressive leaning, Their poll with Shapiro actually has Shapiro up 4, whereas Harris is actually down 2, so that's a +6 swing, and then the other one's a +10 swing, right? So it's a pretty massive difference polling wise, and so I think that the idea is that choosing him for Pennsylvania gives you the advantage in Pennsylvania. And as it looks like right now, Pennsylvania is probably going to end up deciding the actual election results. And so I think that the probability that you win Pennsylvania but lose the election is highly unlikely, because you would have to you lose Michigan and Wisconsin without, and also lose all the other hedges. The Democrats have hedges. In my opinion, Nevada, Georgia, and like a super unlikely hedge, I think, is Arizona, but it still exists, I'll say. So even if you lose Wisconsin or Michigan, that can be subsidized. Either of those can be subsidized by just Georgia alone, or you could do Arizona plus Nevada. Those are both combinations that can outrun either of those, right? So I think that that's kind of the idea behind why they're going to choose him. But I think Walz, would have a lot of appeal. And so what's interesting is if sort of the union is coming out against them, you wonder, because I think Shapiro is pretty popular with unions. So maybe he's just popular with unions in Pennsylvania or maybe in the Rust Belt area. But the concerns about public school or the private school vouchers actually make sense. And Kelly, I think, is just dead on arrival, because he obviously seemed to be hesitant, wasn't as supportive, and I think he's regretting it now, because I think it really hurt his odds to actually become the vice president. But I just don't think Kelly brings anything actually to the table. So because Kelly doesn't actually bring anything to the table, there's no reason to pick him. He's actually losing. If you looked at the poll, if I pulled up the Arizona poll, he's actually losing by 2 points in that poll, in the same PPP poll. And so you can't choose somebody from that state if they're losing and then they bring nothing to the table. Shapiro brings that, electoralism in Pennsylvania. I know a lot of people are doubting it, but the numbers bear it out that he's actually winning in Pennsylvania, so that's going to help a lot, and that's why I think they're going to end up choosing him, because likely the election is just simply going to come down to Pennsylvania. It's a really important state, and then it's harder to cover for Pennsylvania than it is the other states. You could beat any one of the other 2 Rust Belt states just with Georgia or Arizona plus Nevada. You can't do that with Pennsylvania. It's not possible. You'd have to have Georgia plus one of the other ones is the only way, which is much less likely. It's much more difficult. So I think that's probably who they're going to end up going with. But I think that Beshear's electoral impact would be pretty interesting, because Beshear, I guess, is he's a true red state, governor. I think he's the only true red one, because Walz is from Minnesota, which is not a red state. Nor I would say it's kind of like, I would say it's lean blue/blue. You could argue it's blue. So he's definitely not that. And so he actually comes from Kentucky, like a right state. And so you can see there, Shawn Fain having him as number 1. I was surprised. I didn't know he was that much of a pro-union person. So he's literally at the top. He's even above Walz, right, who's widely now considered to be the most progressive. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see, because unions are obviously super, super important. Obviously all throughout history, but all elections, and this one especially, because it's really going to come down to your union support, your manufacturing, blue collar job support in states like Pennsylvania and such. It's going to come down to just very few votes, and so that person who can pick out those people who are union supporters is going to be really huge. So this is going to be a really big thing. And is this influence being I think this is given in this interview. This is in the Detroit News, by the way. Is this information getting its way to the Kamala Harris campaign, or, is this going to kind of make any sways? It's already, what we know is that the drop is imminent. So the announcement for the actual vice presidency is actually imminent. It's inbound very soon. I believe it's supposed to be Monday. And that, I think, is around the time, if not exactly when the trip is going to be announced. So it's close, and so I think they probably already made the decision on Shapiro based on the polling that I just showed you for Pennsylvania. But I think Walz would have really good potential for crossover appeal with both moderates and Republicans. And I think Beshear has a potential too, but I'm not 100% sure, because Beshear hasn't really done as much in terms of trying out for the position. And I thought when I watched Josh Shapiro speak, I thought he was actually worse than I had previously believed. And so I didn't think that he was going to be as effective in the way that he attacks Trump as Walz was. In fact, Walz, he was the first one to start this whole weird attack, right, that's really taken off. And that was him, right? The betting markets have it very, very highly in favor of Shapiro, and I think that that's pretty unfortunately going to be the pick. My only hope is that because he's more conservative and that's going to end up being the vice president, my only hope is that at least he's able to help the Harris ticket win. If not, that would be really embarrassing. But that's kind of my hedge against I don't really like this guy. I want him to be there. But, if he does end up getting picked, hopefully at least he carries the state. and wins the election. So, yeah, we'll have to see how things go. But right now, I think likely it's probably leaning in the direction of Shapiro at this point. And the first drop is in Pennsylvania, which is not definitive in terms of what's going to happen. But, we'll have to see.